Hey, thanks for checking out The Solid Verbal. Now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel for college football content all off season long.
Welcome back to The Solid Verbal. Boys and girls, my name is Ty Hildenbrand, that fine gentleman over there. Tennis loser of the day,
Most
Dan
days.
Rubenstein. I meant that lovingly. You know I meant that lovingly.
I know. You threw in an 86 golfing last week. Is that true?
It was bad, dude. Oh, my God.
Oh,
It was so bad.
old country club verbal
I'm still
over
rusty.
here.
And, you know, I'm trying to work on a golf round with friend of the podcast, Richard Johnson.
Yeah,
a
of
rival
course.
college football podcaster.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to work out a golf round. I can't take it 86 on the course against him. He'll beat my brains in.
Are you guys going, because now, you know, split zone duo is huge. Solid verbal is huge. You know, we're just, you know, rare air. Is it Shinnecock? Where are you guys going to play? Somewhere crazy?
I don't know.
Beth
I don't
Page
know.
Black? Come on, guys.
I'd want to play Beth Page.
Yeah.
I don't know if my game is in Beth Page shape
Go
right
down
now.
to Pinehurst.
Pinehurst would not be good.
Whistling Straits. I want U.S. Open course for you guys.
Listen, sir, we have a budget at this operation. I'm assuming Richard does as well.
Yeah.
So we probably need to find
Kapalua?
somewhere. But,
No?
dude, budgets. We've got budgets.
Turn it into content. That's all.
Turn into content. That's
Yeah.
not a bad idea. Yeah, we probably need to find somewhere between here and there.
Okay, fair enough.
There being New York, here being Eastern PA. So if you have any Jersey golf suggestions, hit me up, solidverbal@gmail.com. But alas, this is a college football show. Thank you for bearing with us through the long preamble. I am Ty. He is Dan. Today is our May Q&A.
Oh, there it is.
Congratulations, Skippy. You've got mail.
You've got mail on the Solid Verbal.
As often as we can, and a little bit more in the off season, we like to pay homage to those of you who write in solidverbal@gmail.com, who tweet in at solidverbal on the Twitter, who write to us on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram. I don't know if I'm forgetting anywhere. Be
Right.
Real, is that a thing that you've tried? Probably not.
I haven't, but good for you if you have.
We've got questions here. Hopefully we've got some answers. The Verbaler Hood again delivered with the utmost intelligence, the utmost
Efficiency?
genuine curiosity, efficiency.
Yeah.
I'm using all these adjectives and adverbs probably improperly. But without further ado, should we just dive in?
Yeah, verballers.com, solidverbal@gmail.com. You know all the things. Let's just talk about college football.
Ross out on Twitter says, is the talent gap in college football too great to see true Cinderella stories, Dan?
Well, I think we need to possibly rejigger what Cinderella means.
Yeah, well-
in a land, in a world of
His question is
Yeah.
Cinderella stories in the new college football playoff.
right.
I was trying to do a dramatic pause there, and you filled it with your words, which is fine.
I will never say never, because there can still be an opportunity for a team who is not thought of as a national championship contender if they're at least brushing up against that blue chip ratio. Like, I'm not going to say you have to, although the overwhelming evidence suggests that you probably should have a roster stacked with much coveted talent, right? You should have an eye test, walk off the bus kind of roster. But you can get lucky with an incredible quarterback, with a top 5 NFL caliber quarterback. So, like, I don't know, a Mahomes, a Josh Allen. You're talking about, guys that have succeeded in the NFL that weren't necessarily playing for major elite type universities. So somebody like that paired with a defense, like we like to say, it's quarterback and defense. And so we saw it from Cincinnati just in terms of getting there as a non-major program without national championship aspirations, generally speaking, because of their roster and their conference. You have that NFL-style defense with the Jalen Sanders coming off of the edge and those 2 crazy lockdown corners. They weren't able to do it, obviously. They didn't have the quarterback. They didn't have the offense to really take it to Alabama. So I'm never going to say never.
Right.
But we've seen guys attract, we saw what Tom Herman did at Houston in terms of attracting high-level talent. Offense wasn't there for Houston. So I'm willing to say, yeah, there's a Herb Brooks miracle in college football to be had, but it's going to take that crazy special quarterback who's crazy loyal to that place, or if it's just, a place gets lucky, an NC State right? Is that a Cinderella story if NC State wins a national championship? Absolutely.
Well, this is where I think you're right.
Yeah.
And I think it does come down to your definition of a Cinderella story.
Yeah.
Ross's full question was, in the new college football playoff format, are we going to see any Cinderella stories like we're accustomed to seeing in March Madness, right? Comparing the basketball to the football. For context, in this year's NCAA tournament, we had a 16 knock off a 1. We had a 9 in FAU go to the Final Four. We had a 4 basically destroy everyone. UConn destroyed everybody and ended up winning the whole damn thing. Can something like that happen in a 12-team college football playoff? I think I'm with you. I don't want to be the guy who says no, but in short, I think the answer is no.
So continue. Sorry.
Because it's more complicated than just a talent gap, the talent gap that Ross refers to. For one, we're talking about 2 very different tournaments, right? In that there are 56 fewer teams now.
Yeah.
In the new in the 2.0 version of the college football playoff. And so there just aren't as many chances to get that Cinderella. There will also be fewer Cinderella stories because the lower seeded teams, at least the way this is presently drawn up, more often than not are going to be on the road, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be playing road games, which does make a difference in college football. Also, fewer Cinderellas in this world because the sports are very different, Dan.
Yeah, of course.
They're a very different sport. Basketball is a game of runs. It's faster paced, fewer players. Football is physical and structured, and some of the best pros, the Josh Allens, ends up playing for
Wyoming and doesn't complete a lot of passes and develops in the NFL. Yeah.
Kind of play for mediocre teams. So it's just very different. If we want to get back to the point, though, the original question about the talent gap, college basketball and college football are also very different in that college basketball is built around parity and college football isn't.
So
not even close.
So can we run through some teams where, because we are in the shadow, in the wake of what I would consider to be a college football Cinderella team ending up in the national championship.
Yeah.
They got demolished, but
that's
by the way, Cinderella story. Continue.
Had 7 guys drafted off of that team.
Totally.
So rejiggering your definition of Cinderella story, I think is appropriate here.
Yes. So saying TCU is a Cinderella story is not an insult to TCU because the context of TCU with a backup quarterback, with a first-year head coach, making their way through a tough Big 12, not even winning the Big 12 championship, of course, and then beating a Michigan team in wild style, that is a Cinderella story. That is unexpected. That is a surprise. They did not have the talent level that Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia had, the other teams in the playoff. So I would say yes, TCU ending up in the national championship game. Now, that's going to be more difficult with more games to win, especially on the road, as you mentioned. But, if Wisconsin ends up in the national championship game, that's a Cinderella story, as far as I'm concerned, because of the talent difference between what Wisconsin annually seems to pull in. They get to the Big Ten championship game. They've played in Rose Bowls. They are a really good program. But within the context of who's winning national championships and who's annually competing for national championships or top 5 classes or sending 7, 10, 12 guys to the next level, every other year, there are schools. So, pretty good Power 5 programs ending up in the national championship game, nowhere near, top 5, top 12 recruiting classes, ending up in the national championship game is either something that we can expect to happen every 15 years. And if something's happening every 15 years, it kind of feels Cinderella-ish. Oregon didn't have the blue chip ratio in 2010. I don't believe. I don't know if they did in 2014. 2010 was a lot closer against that Auburn team in winning a national championship because Auburn did not have I don't believe, star-studded defense outside of Nick Fairley. So it can happen in weird years, and college football is known to throw some weird screwball years at us every so often. But I think this new format is going to weed out those quote-unquote Cinderellas much more often than a 4-team or a BCS in which, it was a wonderful development cycle where you have a bunch of seniors and a Heisman caliber quarterback or just a very, very, very good quarterback. It's just going to be so much more difficult if you are, we can run through this list of teams. If you're Kansas State, if you're Wisconsin, even if Penn State hasn't made a playoff, I wouldn't say they're Cinderella because they have the blue chip ratio. Continue.
We don't need a list.
I want a list.
We don't need a list. But here's the point.
I want to vaguely insult a number of fan bases.
No. We don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. But I think you pushed up against the right point here. This ultimately as we said at the top, comes down to your definition of a Cinderella story. And I believe the TCU story rises to that level. But again, it's not like little giants out there. They had 7 guys get drafted into the league. The more likely scenario in the new world is, let's say, an inconsistent blue blood going on an unlikely run.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about FAU like they went on a run in the basketball tournament. It's not FAU beating Alabama.
Right.
But it is the Wisconsins. It is the Kansas States. It's teams that aren't normally there but still play at a very high level. I still think upsets are possible in the first round. There is absolutely a team or two that's going to crap the bed even if they're playing at home.
Sure.
This is college football.
Yeah.
But I think that's the likely scenario. I think you hit it. It's sort of the unlikely Power 5 team that gets in there and has enough talent, is in the right kind of fight with the right kind of style at the right time. So it's not Gus Johnson yelling slipper still fits. It's nothing like that.
Right.
But it is, I think, variety of some of these new teams getting in there, going on a run when it doesn't feel like they should have a chance. For my money, that'd be cool. I'm all about getting some new teams in there and making it feel different, even if it's the same 4 teams at the end, which I know is the fear. But Ross, to answer your question, in the long-winded fashion that Dan and I often do, it is Cinderella. Cinderella stories are possible, though maybe not by your definition of Cinderella.
Right. It's not going to be a situation where, we're watching the NCAA tournament, whether it's FAU or George Mason or any of those schools, VCU, right, that you're going to see a story before the game kicks off. You're like, yeah, the quarterback's an Uber driver most of the year. You're not going to see those specific background human interests because we're going to be talking about, like, out of nowhere, it's Washington State, right? Out of nowhere, it's still these humongous major university and major programs that have been to major bowl games, but the context of the sport is such that we're just like, okay, so I guess we now consider Minnesota, the University of Minnesota, to be a Cinderella story, or the University of Texas. That was mean. But you know what I'm saying, Ty.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you.
All right. Next question.
Go to Chaka.
Let's do it.
On Twitter, but a noted verballer out on Patreon. He says, if your school hired a new coach and this coach managed the new gig the way Coach Prime has at Colorado, how would you feel as a fan and alumni? Could the Prime strategy, I like that we've given it a name now,
Of course.
work at schools with more recent success like Oregon, Penn State, Notre Dame, et cetera, et cetera? So again, context is important here. Colorado has had 1 winning season in 17 years.
Is that true? The one Mike McIntyre era with Seifo Lufau?
1.
Okay.
1. They won 1 game last year.
Yeah.
So now, assuming...
Suck it, Cal. Sorry.
Yeah,
that was
assuming that there won't be, I don't know, crippling NCAA infractions as a result of all this, or just a total disbanding of the football team where the administration throws up their hands and says, enough, we can't. We don't have the energy. Assuming that neither of those two things happens, the obvious question is, how much worse could it really get?
Sure.
How much worse could it really get at this point? You went 1-11 last year and were pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if I'm a Colorado fan, it's tough to watch. However, fans can be vindictive. I could be vindictive.
Yeah. I
suppose there's a little bit of a neck crack quality to just this very, very dramatic cleaning of house.
Sure.
Like it's been so bad. Just everybody says kind of under their breath, like just fire everybody, get rid of everybody. He's actually doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm amused from afar to see how this goes and if it works. And if I'm a Colorado fan, again, it's probably tough to watch, but again, how much worse could it get?
So Colorado's a special situation because of Deion Sanders' specific high-profile nature and the attention he draws to himself, which I don't say is a negative thing because college football is an attention sport. It's an attention economy, as all the best people in the world like to say. It is a different deal at Oregon, Penn State, and Notre Dame because I don't believe their rosters have come close to where Colorado's has been these past couple of seasons. They've had some star power that have transferred out, but in terms of line play, quarterbacks, it just hasn't been there. It just hasn't been there. And Notre Dame, Oregon, and Penn State have not faced that situation, at least not since Penn State had all those players transfer way back when in the wake of the Paterno stuff. So it would be different. James Franklin, certainly a high-profile coach, and if he were driving out 40, 50, 60 players in an offseason, it'd get some attention. Major program in a major conference. Notre Dame, especially under Brian Kelly, if he were doing that kind of thing, it would get a lot of attention. Brian Kelly is not the most beloved college football coach, and if suddenly he, at a major place like Notre Dame, drove out 45, 50, 53 players in an offseason, it would get attention. People would say, what the heck is going on? That's because it's a Midwestern school, and they people in the Midwest say heck a lot. Oregon, Dan Lanning does not have that, but Chip Kelly did. Mike Bellotti, to a certain extent, did. And guess what? Dan Lanning has revamped, let's call it to be nice, and I'm sure he has done some of the things that Deion Sanders is accused of doing. Oregon is completely turned over their roster this offseason. It's something like, if you look at, they show the rankings where it's like Colorado, 53 players gone from last year's roster. It's like 30 from Oregon. They're like second or third with A&M. And so we're dealing with a situation in which Deion Sanders is getting a lot of flack for operating within the rules and doing everything he can to build a roster that is going to look like, both physically and on paper, a lot more like a team that he envisions winning 9, 10, 11 games on a Power 5 level. So, no, I don't think the reaction will be as severe as Deion Sanders, but that's more a product of his notoriety and his openness to speaking publicly all the time. And that's okay. So, no, I don't think the reaction would be similar, but yeah, depending on who the coach is, depending on the place, if Steve Sarkisian were doing this at Texas, get a lot of attention. If Nick Saban were doing this at Alabama, get a lot of attention. It would.
Well, sure. I just don't think it doesn't work at a place with more recent success, if only because it's harder to justify.
Yeah.
He mentioned as part of his question here, Oregon, Penn State, Notre Dame. Granted, they haven't been close to winning the national championship, but all at some point over the last couple of years have been a stone's throw from the playoffs.
Sure.
So it's not been that bad at any of those places, even if they're not at the mountaintop. And I just don't, like, an AD would not hire you if you went into that interview and said, I just want to nuke the roster.
Yeah.
They want to hire you because it's not that bad to begin with. Tweaks, changes, optimizations, of course. Even if some things are very different. But it doesn't work in the same way that it works at Colorado, which is a very unique situation right now. Very unique situation in a firebrand with Deion Sanders, a team that's really bad, been really bad over the last 20 years or so. And to bring him in now and kind of kick up all this dust, I don't think there are a whole lot of places where that would really be acceptable at the Power 5 level. So
yeah,
we'll see.
It's an interesting dynamic too, because why is there so much attention on Deion Sanders? Well, obviously he courts that attention, rightfully so, because it draws, eyeballs and recruits to take unofficial visits, official visits, etc. But also, people click on those stories. People click on those YouTube
Attention
videos.
economy, as a wise man once said.
So they're not going to click on Notre Dame and Oregon and Penn State because those head coaches are not leading off PTI or around the horn in the way that Deion Sanders has, that famous face that none of those other coaches have. No matter how many people know James Franklin in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, whatever.
No, you're right.
James Franklin can walk down the street of downtown Seattle, Minneapolis, Austin, whatever, not going to get a ton of attention. Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, get a picture, get a selfie. It's just different.
It is different. Okay, let's go to Luke.
Yeah.
On Twitter, also one of our Patreon verballers at verballers.com. Which team do you think will make the biggest leap forward in 2023? Doesn't need to be a championship caliber team, but who will be the most improved in 2023? So we kind of addressed this on our last episode where you and I had our internal affairs discussion, but there are a couple different ways that you can answer this question. I want to turn it over to you.
Sure.
You could look at a team like a USC, like an Oklahoma, an Iowa, teams for whom a marginal improvement on one side of the ball will feel like a quantum leap.
Yeah.
I feel pretty confident that USC and Oklahoma are going to be better. I'm not so sure about Iowa, but there are also teams like Notre Dame where they got dramatically better at one specific position in the offseason. And again, barring anything going totally sideways, it's going to feel like a big leap forward just because of that one position. When I think of this question, though, I think of TCU in 2022 because that was a leap. Nobody saw that leap coming.
Sure.
So, first off, what does a leap forward mean to Dan Rubenstein? And then secondly, which teams answer that bell for you?
3 or 4 more wins than where they were last year. Like, I don't care about USC in terms of improvement. Like, they can improve their defense, but they already won double-digit games last year. So it's not dramatic as bad as that defense looked at times because they still had an incredible offense and have an incredible quarterback, and they're going to win a ton of games this year. So it's hard to look at the complete USC story if the defense gets better as a major leap forward, unless they win the national championship this year, right? That would be major. So in terms of teams who I think did at least something really well or had to deal with a freak injury at quarterback and that set them back a good amount, I think the Arizona schools are interesting because both of them played pretty decent offense and have recruited relatively well. Arizona, just in terms of bringing in quality players. Arizona State, just in terms of overhauling the roster. Yeah. Another school with a low profile head coach who overhauled the roster, but it's not getting a lot of attention because it's ASU.
I'll take a flyer in ASU.
Sure.
Why not? Go ahead. Who else you got?
So just in terms of quarterback injuries, I think Miami's reasonable. Losing Tyler Van Dyke the way that they did. Look, they overhaul their coaching staff in a matter of speaking with a new offensive and defensive coordinator. So if Lance Guidry works out on defense, his defense wasn't terrible. The problem was offense, the offensive consistency, offensive injuries, losing, receivers early on in the season paired with losing TVD. Like, it's just going to get better because they're going to have better players healthy at Miami. And so they don't make a bowl game. They should make a bowl game this year. They should win more games this year, and it should just get better. I think A&M is an interesting candidate because they're going to do something at least very, very well. They're going to rush the passer really well. They've built up depth on defense. It seems like they've found a quarterback of the future where they had inconsistencies there and injuries along the offensive line late in the season last year. I just think the universe is going to even out for them. So I think I could see them being dramatically better. Even if they're not an 11-win team, dramatically better means 8-9 wins.
Yeah, they were 5-7 last year. They were a mess on offense. Yeah. And I do think if anything good came from last season, I think they found their quarterback. And at least on the surface, I know Jimbo's comments in the offseason about who's calling plays and that sort of thing has been weird, to say the least. But they've at least signaled some motivation to try and change the offense for the better by bringing in Bobby Petrino. They've also got a ton back from last year's team. They're not starting fresh. Right. They were very young last season. And I feel like down the stretch, they may have figured some of that stuff out. So A&M was actually first on my list. I'm glad you mentioned them.
Yeah, I also look at some of the teams that finished strong last year as they sort of get into a rhythm. And I don't know if that necessarily statistically and the data points to like, oh, you win your final 4 or 5, even if you started slow, you'll be good the next season. But a team like South Carolina is interesting to me. A really positive recruiting class. It seems like there's a lot of momentum. They lose a couple key players to the portal, so that's disappointing. Marshawn Lloyd and Jaheim Bell both left. But I think there's a good amount of momentum in Columbia. And they go to a bowl game last year, and I think a major improvement. They 7-5 last year, and did they beat Notre Dame in the bowl game?
No.
I'm not saying that to be a dick. Sometimes I do say things to be a dick, but I'm not saying that now. So they get into the bowl. They win the bowl game against a major opponent. So South Carolina is an interesting answer maybe in the next couple years to keep showing improvement. Otherwise, I don't know. I look at quarterback injuries. I look at teams that did a very specific thing well. Like Iowa State's interesting to me. They made a change at offensive coordinator. They played excellent defense by and large last year. And they had a down year in a tough Big 12. That to me seems like they're a candidate where they got a little bit too much fluff, a little bit too much hype coming off of, they win the Fiesta Bowl against Oregon and they return all those players and they're like, okay, Matt Campbell's the next big thing. And then they stop figuring out offense. And so they make that change. They seem like they could be a candidate if they're able to at least field an average offense. They should have another good defense this year. I think Iowa State's a candidate for major improvement.
Yeah, I believe you misspoke and said that Notre Dame lost the bowl. Notre Dame won the bowl.
Notre Dame did win the bowl game behind Alabama's starting quarterback, Tyler Buchner. Yeah.
That's correct. But it was a good game.
Yeah, South Carolina, I know it was back and forth. I apologize.
Absolutely could have won that game. So I will not hold it against you that you got that mixed up. I would throw Auburn in there as well. I think Auburn will be a lot better. It is an SEC West schedule, which is not easy. They also have Georgia from the East, which is not great. But I think the
They
lines
always
would be
do.
better. Yeah, they always the lines would be better on both sides. For all of Hugh Freeze's baggage, I think he'll reboot them fairly quickly. It is going to feel more organized on that side. I'll also take a flyer on Kentucky.
Can I follow up on Auburn?
Yeah, please.
Robbie Ashford Auburn or transfer portal quarterback to be named Casey Thompson Auburn? Like, is painting and improving along the lines? I don't know why I said painting along the lines. I'm a very silly person. Is improving there enough with a quarterback who, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I don't necessarily feel comfortable with Robbie Ashford being a downfield threat for an improved Auburn team.
I don't either. And I think it's more
that's concerning
than just the lines. But
yeah,
the line play was just so bad last year for Auburn.
Sure.
It was so bad. And if only he can get some semblance of organization and stability up front, which I believe he can do. They were very active in the portal along both lines. I believe that can give them a little bit of a springboard. Bear in mind that Auburn was 5-7 last year. Can Auburn go 8-4? I think it's possible.
Notable stability bringer, Hugh Freeze.
You'll take 8-4 though after 5-7.
Sure. Yeah, that counts as major improvement.
Let's go to Binu, who is one of our board members from a year
hell
ago.
yeah.
Who will be Alabama's starting quarterback this season? We talked about this a little bit on the last show.
Mm-hmm.
There has been a new quote brought to my attention, courtesy of our friends over at On3. Did you see this?
Do you know what that reference is, by the way? The On 3 title?
Is it like on 3, ready, break?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good job. Continue.
Quote, what I was told about this quarterback situation as a whole, with bringing in Tyler Buchner, was that Alabama is looking for their Stetson Bennett.
Man.
That's a real quote.
That's a tough
That is a real
say.
quote.
Yeah.
That is a real quote from J.D. Pickell. What? What?
I understand the heart and spirit of that, where you're trying to find somebody who's not necessarily a first-round pick like Alabama has had, but if you can't find that, somebody who's just a winner, right?
But they don't have anything in common.
Of course.
They have nothing in common. What?
Yeah, I can't really explain it further than that. Who's going to be Alabama's starting quarterback? If I had to wager, Ty Simpson, but I don't know. I definitely don't know. He looked to be the most comfortable and confident in Tommy Rees's offense at times, but Jalen Milroe has a really nice arm and obviously can move. I don't see it with Tyler Buchner, but again, like we mentioned on our internal affairs show, at some point, Tommy Rees sent Tyler Buchner a text or had a phone call that included, bro, you can win this. You can absolutely be our starting quarterback.
I don't get it, man. I don't get it. And I don't want to be mean to Buchner because nobody was higher on Buchner than me.
Right.
I was all in I love the backup quarterback at Notre Dame. You know this about me after 15 years of doing this show. But Alabama fans will see Tyler Buchner's throwing motion on the first pass and they'll be like, oh God, what have we gotten ourselves into? They don't want this.
So
they're not going to want this.
Tyler Buchner gets hurt against Marshall last year. That's the game he got hurt in?
Yeah.
Or
he
Stanford,
got hurt.
Cal, whatever.
I think he got hurt in the first game, but.
Okay. So let's just imagine a universe. Let's just do a thought exercise. Tyler Buchner last year a healthy Tyler Buchner all season long is going to be more effective than Drew Pine.
Correct. Absolutely.
That we definitely agree on.
100%.
So Tyler Buchner is likely beating Clemson in very similar fashion, which was a lot of power rushing and turning Clemson over, all those things. So that was the defense. Tyler Buchner did he play against Stanford in that loss? You can bring it up. I'm trying to count on you as a Notre Dame expert here, Ty.
Well, you got to prep me.
I know. Sorry. I have to prep you to be a Notre Dame fan, Ty.
Last season was so traumatic.
I know. So did Tyler Buchner? I think that was.
No, Buchner didn't play in that game.
Okay. Did he play against Cal? The game that
No,
maybe
he played,
Notre Dame
he played
could
in
have
the
lost?
bowl game. He played in the bowl game.
Right.
Was
So
out
he
all year.
doesn't really
played in the
play.
bowl
Plays
game.
like the first couple games.
No.
So Tyler Buchner with a full season of experience probably gets more comfortable running a major offensive program or a major offense for a major program, right?
Sure.
Like we're saying, he's probably going to be a little bit less careless with the ball. He's probably going to pick his spots to run. He's probably going to know when to throw it away. He's probably going to, have a better rapport with receivers over the course of the season. So we assume on a certain level, if Tommy Rees is a good offensive coordinator and Notre Dame has enough offensive line and receiving talent, it wasn't a star power studded receiving room, but there's receiving talent. There's Michael Mayer, that Tyler Buchner becomes a pretty good quarterback for a pretty good team, right?
Sure.
That's not a crazy thing to extrapolate.
No, it isn't.
So if in that universe,
Bama?
Stetson
Bennett?
In that universe, if Tyler Buchner is a pretty good quarterback for a pretty good team playing big name opponents and improves over the course of the season, and then he transfers to Alabama, you're a little disappointed. Right?
I'm dumbfounded by that quote, Dan. I can't get past the quote.
Okay. I'm not saying that I'm a Buchner fan. I'm not saying I'm a Buchner
Look,
believer.
of course he's better than Drew Pine.
So he's better than Drew Pine, and he improves over the course of the season for Notre Dame, to whatever extent, to whatever his ceiling is under Tommy Rees. I am just saying there is a universe in which Tyler Buchner is not necessarily Stetson Bennett, who was an excellent quarterback for Georgia and winning national titles, but Tyler Buchner is somebody who can operate with comfort in an offense for a major place.
Speaking of Stetson Bennett,
I'm trying to just see every side here, Ty. That's all I'm doing.
There's only one side, but
okay.
Whatever.
Also, Notre Dame is a place where quarterbacks don't necessarily always flourish.
Really?
Recently? What are we talking about?
Is this new?
Well, I'm just saying, like,
I'm being facetious.
Oh,
They've been terrible.
I know. So I'm saying change of scenery, change of view, right?
Can they change his throwing motion? Have you seen it? It's like Phil Jerkovic.
Sure.
There's a little bit of jerky boys going on.
Better than Drew Pine last year. Okay.
Speaking of Stetson Bennett, Katie on Instagram.
Okay.
How will Stetson Bennett do with the Rams?
I don't know.
Katie. He will learn a lot from being in the locker room. A lot of those guys have Super Bowl rings.
Sure.
Being around Sean McVay. He's going to learn the rigors of being a pro athlete as compared to what he's used to at Georgia. There will be a bit of a ramp up to try and figure that out. I believe he will use that knowledge in a very productive way to craft a compelling insurance policy for friends and teammates as part of Stetson Bennett's State Farm, because like a good neighbor, Stetson is always there.
Yeah.
State Farm, not a sponsor, could be. Thank you, Katie.
I would love... Look, players get hurt. Matthew Stafford got hurt last year. I don't know much about the NFL, but they had to bring in Baker Mayfield on like no time, and he has been a below average NFL quarterback as far as I can tell. Yes? Is that fair to say?
Very below average.
Okay,
yeah.
so Baker Mayfield's a below average NFL quarterback. Stetson Bennett has been a very good college quarterback, not a level of Baker Mayfield in college. And with time and a system, if he's asked to step in and make some throws against the Seahawks or the 49ers or whoever, sure. I don't know about next year. Maybe in the next couple of years. I could see a situation in which Stetson Bennett is prepared to make the exact throws Sean McVay tells him to do before the snap. Yeah.
That's possible.
Okay.
That's possible.
Look, I don't know anything about the NFL. Let's be very clear. If you had told me Brock Purdy was about to go undefeated as a starting NFL quarterback in which he finishes the game, I'd be like, cool, great. Wouldn't have seen it coming.
Here you go. Here's one from Bowling Green Football Talk on Twitter. Thank you for the question. Do you foresee fewer group of 5 players drafted due to players transferring up to Power 5 after a great season, or will some Power 5 backups transferring down even all that out if they stand out on film starting for a group of 5 school?
Right.
This is a great question. I did some research this morning very early.
Okay.
I dug back through the last 3 drafts. This is very anecdotal. It's not exactly data science. But
okay, so you researched, but you're not
did a little
bringing
bit
the
of research.
data. Yeah.
On short notice.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's statistically significant at this point, but I dug through the last 3 drafts to see if there were any trends. If you look at all players drafted, group of 5 or below, so Division II, Division III, what have you, I also lumped Liberty in there because I didn't know where to put them.
Okay.
31 players taken in last week's draft in that class.
Okay.
Which pales in comparison to 2022 when there were like 75 guys taken.
75 group of 5 players.
Or below. And I hate to kind of make them feel less than. That is not what I'm saying,
non-power
but
5.
Non-power 5, thank you.
Yeah.
So 31 versus 75 is a smaller number.
Yep.
If you go back to 2021, it wasn't quite as dramatic a drop-off, but it's still lower. 44 guys got drafted in 2021 from non-power 5 schools.
Mm-hmm.
I did not have time to see how many of those guys were transfers, which I think would be the tell here. But I suspect the theory is true.
Okay.
So if you're a pro caliber player, to answer the question, if there's a Power 5 team out there that is in the market for your position, my hunch is that we'll see more of those guys continuing the trends that we've seen now over the last 2 off seasons, which is, you got a spot for me, I'll take it. You're going to pay me even better.
Well, we're also losing, I don't know the correct way to say this, but power G5 programs in Cincinnati, Houston, BYU, and Cincinnati, what did I say? Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, BYU. We're losing them to a major conference, so all of their draft picks are going to be folded in. And just over the years, we've seen programs take that leap up to the Power 5 level. And so it's just going to change that dynamic. I don't necessarily think it's going to be as overwhelming a tidal wave of quality G5 players going to Power 5 schools. NIL does change that. There is more NIL opportunity at bigger places with bigger fan bases and more money. I think FCS-wise, I think that's going to fall off a cliff. I think if you are an All-American caliber player Oregon's going to start at right tackle, a player from Rhode Island, a Johnny Cornelius. And so those types of players, I think, are going to, Vernon Adams, another example to Oregon, FCS to Power 5. Those types of players are going to find spots that otherwise they would not necessarily have had the opportunity in years past. I think that's going to fall off a cliff. And I just think teams are so much better now at identifying players. And so let's say, okay, let's a thought experiment right now. Be like, Florida's recruiting a player and they just don't have room for him, and his dream is to go to Florida, and he's wanted to go to Florida his entire life, but doesn't get that level of Power 5 offer, decides to go to Samford, decides to go to a Power 5 place, and flashes his first year. Isn't necessarily incredible, but really flashes like, oh, this is a really good freshman in this conference. The opportunity to just jump up right away to Florida has never been easier and faster. So that's kind of stuff is going to happen. It's not just going to be like a grad transfer thing. It's not going to be a 2-3 year, this guy's a clear star, but just the like, okay, this guy was a freshman All-American, now he's looking. That's going to happen more. But I still think on a certain level, I don't think the NFL cares as much about drafting a Power 5 player versus a G5 player.
No, I don't think it matters.
So I think if you are an All-American caliber right tackle at Western Michigan, you'll still get drafted in the first round. They'll still take you. And this is just me guessing. I think for certain guys, if they are thriving somewhere on the G5 level, they might really like playing there. That's where they're stars. That's where they've enjoyed life as a star player. If they're playing at San Diego State, if they're playing at wherever, if they're playing in a MAC, if they're playing for Tulane or something, like maybe Tyjae Spears really liked playing there, and he's going to get enough attention for a good Tulane team at running. Like, I don't think we just have to automatically assume just because you're a star for a smaller level school that the jump is inevitable. So, no, I still think those guys are going to exist. Maybe it comes down. It probably comes down. I don't think there's going to be 9 players taken in 2 years. I think it's probably one of those years. It's a development cycle thing that maybe next year will be 44, the year after that 38, the year after that 51. It's just all over the place.
It's all. I don't think, like I said, it's not my back of the napkin math this morning at 5:30 a.m. is definitely not statistically significant, but it's something to watch, and I think it's a really good question.
Yeah,
Thank you for sending that
but the
in.
thing still is, if the Pac-12 adds San Diego State, well, that's another big school from the G5 level.
It changes things.
Right.
It changes things. Yeah. Christopher on Facebook asks one that I'm going to tee up for you, Dan. I think this is a Dan question through and through. To what extent has USC's last 20 horrible years contributed to Oregon's rise to national prominence and to Utah's recent successes. It's my opinion that if USC would have remained relevant over the last 2 decades, both Oregon and Utah would not have had the opportunity to rise to power.
Right.
What say you, Mr. Rubenstein?
Well, I think Oregon's won, 6 of 8 against USC, something like that. Utah has come in. So I don't think there is a USC vacuum as much as there has been a rise in national recruiting, because all of a sudden everybody... So USC was thriving. We can do a show about this. I have so many thoughts about the West Coast. It's a fascinating place. But USC thrived with Pete Carroll. Probably their best coach ever, just because it's much harder now in the last 20 years to win than it probably was way back when. I don't know, whatever you want to say about, John Robinson or something like that. But the heights that Pete Carroll reached with USC, I think was crazy impressive. So if not their greatest coach ever, their second greatest coach ever, who has won a Super Bowl since. So that has something to do with it. I think the talent level along offensive and defensive lines on the West Coast falling off a cliff since the early 2000s. USC was able to own the West Coast. Washington, Oregon, California, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, all these places are where USC drew in star power. And then they went national, and they got players from New Jersey, from Florida, from Tennessee, huge players, star players, Leonard Williams from Florida. So USC had that priority under Pete Carroll, and to a lesser extent, Lane Kiffin, Sark, whatever. Oregon hires a complete game changer of an offensive play caller and thinker in Chip Kelly, and shreds Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll runs away to the NFL with looming NCAA sanctions, whatever. Look,
I like that turn.
I'm just talking about a timeline here. I don't know.
Runs away to the NFL.
Jeremiah Masoli runs like a defensive. He's reading defensive tackles and shredding USC. Not an NFL quarterback, Jeremiah Masoli, mind you. Player kicked off the team a few months later. So Chip Kelly is shredding everybody on the West Coast. Pete Carroll leaves. All of his 5-star defensive players can't figure out how to tackle a Michael James. And there's some power shift within the conference, at least. So you're losing West Coast players. You have USC being shredded by NCAA sanctions, making unserious hires in Steve Sarkisian at that time and Clay Helton, bringing back Lincoln Riley, who has done an atrocious job of recruiting defensive players out of high school. And so on a certain level, you might have to say Pete Carroll was the best coach at the best time for USC to be the best team on the West Coast, if not the country. And so Oregon coming in and Utah coming in and being more stable in the case of Utah and being more aggressive in the case of Oregon, recruiting nationally, recruiting defense, bringing in Mario Cristobal, say what you will, recruited really, really well, having a quarterback in their backyard in Justin Herbert who worked out, USC relying far too much on an overrated area of the country in terms of talent, as far as I'm concerned, on the West Coast, being an unserious program and letting players like Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, DJU, even though DJU wasn't great for Clemson, but letting these high-profile players, Brock Bowers is from California, USC thrived when it was easier to thrive. Now everybody has 4K footage on YouTube of their high school highlights. Everybody can watch Georgia games, everybody can watch Ohio State games, everybody can watch Florida State games, whatever. And so West Coast players see where big-time football is. I'm not going to blame it on Larry Scott. I'm not going to blame it on, West Coast people caring about football less, because I think there would be an uptick in interest in college football on the West Coast if more teams were serious about college football. But the situation is Oregon is serious. Washington has had bouts of seriousness over the years. UCLA isn't an especially serious program all the time. And so if you're CJ Stroud, why would you go to USC? This is not a serious program. This is bringing in Clay Helton. This is, bringing in a retread defensive coordinator. This is just USC assuming they're going to win because they're USC. USC has fallen off a cliff, not because, there is this, not because everybody else got better and they fell behind. USC is just not dedicated to college football in the way that other programs are. And so, yeah, maybe there's a vacuum that USC could help to fill if they were a serious program, but that's not a world in which we live. So, no, it's not USC just deciding not to be good at football anymore. It was a perfect time and situation for USC to be excellent, and they decided to stop evolving. and didn't take Oregon seriously and didn't take Utah seriously, and they're still paying for it. Does that make sense?
A very thoughtful answer, Dan. It's a very good answer.
USC could be excellent, but,
no notes.
But I don't know. They just assume we're USC. We should just be excellent because we're us. And they got passed. They just did.
AJ out on Instagram. Which of Alabama or Ohio State is next to win its conference championship?
I mean,
think about that question for more than a couple seconds.
Yeah.
It's actually much harder than it seems. I saw it come through and it's like, oh, okay, what's this? But then I actually thought about it. It's like, if you had $100 to bet on one of those two teams winning their conference championship before the other, I'm curious to get your thoughts on who you would pick. I do think it's a harder question that meets the eye. As you may recall, neither team won their conference championship last year. Ohio State hasn't done it for 2 years now because of Michigan's rise.
Neither team played for their conference championship last year.
That's correct. That's correct. I'm inclined to still go Ohio State because it's a much easier path to get there. If you're Alabama, right, we talked about some of the issues or some of the turmoil or some of the uncertainty, I guess is the right way to characterize it, around their quarterback position. We don't know who's playing quarterback. Ultimately, Alabama will be just fine, but there are a lot of landmines on an SEC schedule. A number of teams that can jump up and get you. They've got Texas, too. I mean, it's not easy.
No, the Texas game won't affect their conference championship hopes. But.
I know, but I'm just saying, my point is that it's a tough schedule, and week in and week out, you got to be ready for whatever the SEC and whatever the Alabama schedule as a whole is throwing at you. So I think I still go Ohio State. It's still an easier path. Yeah. Ohio State has two very big games on its schedule every year in the form of Penn State and Michigan. And in many cases, they've only got to win one in order to get into that title game. So I think Ohio State's still the answer, but I'm surprised, actually, AJ, at how much harder this question is the more I thought about it.
Well, we don't know the future of scheduling for both of these conferences.
We do
so
not.
that
We
plays a
do
role with Ohio State, traditionally in the last few years having both Michigan and Penn State on their schedule. So missing them during the regular season, potentially moving forward. I mean, Ohio State's never going to miss Michigan and probably never going to miss Penn State, but we'll see what happens. And we'll see what happens in the SEC, which is, I think, much more up in the air because Alabama has LSU every year, it seems like, and they will in perpetuity. And they have to get through Georgia. I think getting through LSU and Georgia is more difficult than getting through Penn State and Michigan. And so I'm going to go with Ohio State because the track record suggests that they are a program that can consistently build teams to beat Michigan and Penn State. It's been a minute since Penn State has beaten Ohio State. Michigan is in a definite upswing right now and owns that rivalry right now. Could definitely change soon. So
could definitely change soon. Absolutely.
I would say confidently Ohio State.
Lot, LOTT on Facebook. Thoughts on the Big 12 playing in Monterrey, Mexico? And these types of games in general, i.e. Nebraska, Northwestern in Dublin. Notre Dame's got a game in Dublin this coming season, week 0. How do you feel about international games on the college level? We're not big fans of the neutral site game to begin with.
Right.
But I think there's a little bit of added flavor when it's going abroad, different country altogether. I kind of like it. I think there is a limit to it. I don't want to see it go full NFL.
Right.
Where there's a conversation about putting a team in London, that type of thing. Like let's pump the brakes on how aggressive we're getting with these international games. But I do like it. I've never been to Monterrey. I've seen pictures of Monterrey. It looks fabulous.
Mexico's great. Yeah.
Playing a college football game in Monterrey seems like it'd be a pretty cool experience for the kids. I realize that by saying it, I make myself sound like I'm 100 years old. But it would be cool. And it's a cool setting for a game. There are a lot of American football fans in Mexico. And so I'm all for it. I'm all for it at the college level. I think it's cool, but it needs to be within reason.
It does nothing for me. It really does. You know what does stuff for me? I'm okay with, this is where I'm going to be. You want to play on the infield of Talladega?
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm all for that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
If you want to do some stunt stuff and it makes sense geographically for the teams playing, it's much better than playing in Jerry World. I'm great with all. Do you want to play in the infield of Churchill Downs or something? I don't know. But let's get creative. Let's get wild with it. I think that's the experience. Playing in Dublin, look, I understand the connection with Notre Dame. Great. It doesn't do much for me. So much of why I love this sport is everything that surrounds this sport, and removing the entire country for a stunt game over, like having Cal play in Australia. Okay. It all just feels, and this is, it's my own jaded brain. Like, it's just like, yeah, let's try to get a TV deal in Mexico and make more money. Let's try to sell more hats in Mexico. Let's try to get a streaming deal in Mexico with the Big 12. That is just Brett Yormark turning over every stone to try to increase the visibility. He's trying to do something at Rucker Park in New York for basketball. Like, okay, I get why you're a visibility guy. That's your job. But am I more likely to flip over to Kansas State, Houston because they're playing in Mexico? I'm not. I'm just not. I'm here for the game. I'm okay with changing things up and finding someplace new to play a game, but I don't know. Play that game in Kansas in a weird place. Play that game in East Texas in a weird place. I don't need it in Mexico. Sorry.
I have what I believe is the best concept for one of these stunt/international games.
I love the aircraft carrier thing for basketball. I don't know if it's actually good. To play basketball.
I don't know what the physics of that are.
Yeah.
But let me propose a new theory.
Okay.
Everybody wants to take the game and find an outdoor venue for it that's novel and different and cool and fun and unique and makes you want to watch.
Like the outdoor hockey NHL stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Or even playing on the infield of Talladega, wherever. But what about taking the game indoors to a place where it is not normally played? What about like an Air Force hangar, a big warehouse? We've got Air Force bases all around the globe. Empty one of those guys out. Take the B-52s out.
Yeah.
Put a football field in there. I got to believe there's enough clearance to play a regulation football game. Put it on for the service members. You can put it on TV. Obviously, it would not be a normal football game in the sense that we're used to it, but it would, I think, check a bunch of the boxes, and I think it'd be pretty cool. That would be a novelty concept that I could get behind.
Yeah. You got the stands. That's an issue. How do you got to get a bunch of people in there, so you got to bring in bleachers of some kind?
I don't know.
So you're saying a game like a bubble game almost with the NBA, how they play?
A little bit.
I don't know. You lose some juice. You lose some juice with college football not having a big live crowd.
We lived through 2020 though. We could do it once more. Just throwing that out there. Okay.
I think you need stands. I think you need to figure out stands. I don't hate the idea of doing a military base somewhere though. I think
it'd be fun.
That's the beginning of an interesting idea. But you need the service members going ballistic, going nuts all around the field, everything like that. Almost like a much more extended version of everybody surrounding Guile's fights in Street Fighter 2.
Yeah.
You need a ton more, and you need to get vertical with it to get stands in there. But I like the direction you're going with this. I liked Battle of the Bristol, right? The NASCAR situation with Virginia Tech.
That was
awesome. That. So I think there's a place to get creative with this and have some sort of pop-up game. And maybe it's not on a huge level, right? Maybe it's Lehigh Lafayette. I know they played at Yankee Stadium, but maybe there is some sort of, the Johnny Tommy game in Minnesota. Have fun with that somewhere. But I'm okay with stunt games in a very American way. How about that? Let me be xenophobic only with college football.
Go to that crazy high school football stadium in Denton, Texas, wherever it is.
Allen has one of the crazier ones. Yeah.
Go down there.
That's a
play a game
DFW,
down
I
there.
believe. Yeah.
Not a bad idea. All right. So look, we've got more questions here. We've got a question about Notre Dame and realistic expectations. We've got a thought experiment about Rich Rod if he had taken the Alabama job way back when.
We have some non-college football questions? I think we do.
We have a couple here that I want to get into. We've got a question about Dan Enos and Sam Pittman.
Okay.
About the future growth of Group of 5 teams. And we've got a great question here. And I'm going to kick this over to Patreon, Dan. You know what I'm doing with this.
Okay.
For our part 2, if you want to hear the full extended cut of this extended mailbag episode. This question from Brian on Facebook really got me going bright and early this morning. Who regrets the contract more? Texas A&M or Michigan State?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Let's hit pause.
How many, can I ask you a question? And we're going to hit pause.
Yeah, pause. Pause has been hit.
How many Patreon subscribers do we need to hit for you to tell the story about what happened with your day yesterday?
Oh, no. 5K?
7K? 3K? 4K?
If we got to 5K.
5K.
Oh, my. I can't believe you brought that up.
I didn't bring anything up, Ty. All I said was your day yesterday.
I know. There was a heart-to-heart phone call afterwards.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, man. 5. It's got to be 5K.
Okay.
If we get to 5, I'll tell the story.
All right.
If we get to 5.
I would say personal.
Oh, my God.
I would say...
You're the only person I told that story to.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything. I'm not hinting at anything. I would say extremely personal.
Yeah.
It's you've kept it very close to the vest.
It has to stay close to the vest.
Range of very primal emotions, I'd say. And who's gonna hear this? I don't know. Like, let me just you were what's the word? I'm like you were a little bit.
All right, just stop.
Okay.
We need to get to 5K first.
Okay.
I'll lay it all bare at 5K. All right.
I think shaken is probably too strong, but approaching.
Wasn't shaken, was a little stirred.
Frazzled?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I usually keep my head pretty. We're both pretty good at that, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm usually good at being calm.
Yeah.
There was a moment yesterday where I was thrown in a bit of a blender.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. 5K.
5K. We'll do it. Verballers.com, VERBALLERS.com. We've got a little bit of a ways to go here. We want to answer the remainder of these questions.
Yeah.
For those of you who just listen to the podcast, make sure you hit subscribe, follow, rate, review, the whole 9 yards. Make sure you follow along on social media as well. But without further ado, Dan, let's cut it over to Patreon.
Let's.